Ya, nah, ini sih, sebentar. Hari ini setelah UTS kita eh materinya adalah Roma ya. Nah, ini sampai oke, sampai ke halaman 11. Ya, ya, yang tadi sudah bantuin saya, tolong bantuin terus nanti kalau saya ngajar nggak lihat yang masuk, tolong dibantuin ya. Ini ada, oh ada kelas A juga ya kan kemarin. Anu. Oke, selamat siang semuanya. Saya mulai nanti agak eh kalau suara saya agak ngos-ngosan dan tidak jelas, nggak usah tunggu saya berhenti. Kalian boleh langsung bertanya atau meminta untuk saya gimana lah kalau lebih cepat atau gimana. Ini maraton nih saya langsung ngajar 3 kelas dari pagi dead gitu ya. Jadi tidak sefresh biasanya. Oke, intinya begini. Kalian menyadari betul bahwa pembelajaran itu adalah transfer ilmu sehingga kalian punya hak kalau nggak jelas atau kalau kecepatan atau apa langsung tanya nggak usah nunggu sampai selesai ya itu adalah kesepakatan kita dan kemudian tadi eh, materinya hari ini kita akan ada dua pertemuan atau tiga kalau nggak salah yang fokus pada Roma tapi mudah-mudahan bukan berarti Yunaninya langsung hilang di ini ya, hilang di ingatan ya. Jadi eh, apa namanya? Seperti kita ketahui bahwa di dalam arsitektur klasik itu yang dominan adalah Yunani dan Romawi. Namun demikian kita mempelajari Mesir juga sebagai bagian klasik karena pergerakan Romawi, tumbuhnya Mesir itu seimbang dengan Yunani digabung dengan Romawi. Bahkan Mesir itu malah menjadi yang terpanjang karena uh, bersamaan dengan Yunani, Mesir juga sudah tumbuh. Kemudian Yunani dikalahkan Roma, Mesir juga tumbuh sama kuatnya lagi dengan Roma. Anak-anak pagi minggu lalu, 2 minggu lalu ya, minggu kemarin itu kita nggak kuliah, digabungnya. Minggu yang kemarinnya lagi kita nonton film Cleopatra. Tapi yang anak-anak sore nanti deh setelah materi selesai kita voting kita cari film lain yang berhubungan dengan ini gitu ya yang anak pagi dan anak sore nggak belum pernah sama-sama jadi nontonnya exciting nanti nanti saya pertimbangkan menjelang akhir-akhir gitu ya. Tadi kemudian anak pagi udah mulai mengerjakan ini loh udah mulai mengerjakan website dan sebagainya. eh Sebentar, tak tunjukin ya. Anak sore kayaknya kita perlu bimbingan, tapi kalau bimbingan sekarang nggak efisien karena anak pagi. Oh, berarti besok aja. Besok Minggu anak pagi udah nggak ikut kuliah, anak kelas nggak ikut kuliah. Kita akan bahas tentang website yang hmm, yang menjadi tugas besar kalian. Sebentar kemarin itu websitenya itu ada di chat. Site mana ya? Mm. Saya mau mencari websitenya anak pagi di mana sebentar. Site, foto, translate, doc. Loh, aku harus ganti mungkin. Oh, belum verifikasi. Ya, berarti besok itu pembahasannya mengerjakan websitenya. Sebentar. Sebentar. Site. Mana site-nya ya? Aisyah. Oh, ini site-nya. Ya, ini punyanya anak kelas A. Sudah mulai dikerjakan. Ini sudah mulai dikerjakan. Kemudian isinya halamannya adalah ini poster satu, poster 2, catatan digital mapping, review akhir ya. Nanti besok Minggu yang kelas BC kita mulai bimbingan untuk mengerjakan tugas ini. Begitu dengan memasukkan materi UTS-nya dan sesuai pembagian ya. Oke. eh, Sekarang kita mulai perkuliahan. Ini 3 pertemuan kalau nggak salah, Romawi Arsitektur. eh Anak kelas lagi kemarin kita udah sempat nonton bareng YouTube tentang Cleopatra. Nanti kapan-kapan kalau kalian mau tak bikin polling aja kalau kalian mau nonton bareng lagi. Kemarin putri saya udah ngajarin saya bagaimana caranya nonton Netflix sharing. Kalau pakai Netflix biasa di-sharingkan begini kan mati. Nah, kemarin anak saya menggunakan apalah itu kotak-katik yang bisa dia gunakan dari Belanda dan dari Indonesia itu kita nonton bersamaan itu tentang film horor gitu. Jadi nanti menjelang perkuliahan kita nikmati film beneran gitu ya, film real tentang dokumenter tentang eh, Roma dan Mesir gitu. Oke, ini adalah ini kenapa sih? Nah, apa sih jadi nanti seperti yang saya katakan ya, kalian sudah tahu ding waktu materi pertama tentang klasik kan kalian boleh milih tuh Yunani dan Romawi bebas begitu ya. Dan kemudian kalian menemukan conclusionnya itu kayaknya eh, ada ikatan kadang-kadang bingung nih, ini Yunani Roma gitu kan, waktu satu. Kemudian konsep yang kedua, yang kemarin UTS kan, kalian mulai mempelajari tentang Yunani. Nah, saat itu kita sudah mulai melihat periodenya Yunani. Kenapa? Karena nanti meskipun di Yunani, kalian akan menemui dia adalah aliran Romawi, begitu. Kenapa? Karena ada masanya Yunani sudah dijajah oleh Romawi. Nah, kemudian terus dijajah di Romawi terus bedanya apa? Nah, ini adalah video yang menggambarkan oh tampak seperti apa sih arsitektur Romawi itu begitu ya. Terus ini bisa nggak touch ke YouTube ya? Oh dia nggak bisa. Kalau gitu saya copy aja supaya layarnya besar. Oh dia nggak ada sisinya ya, nggak ada. Kalian kita harus menontonnya pakai. Mudah-mudahan nggak pakai karena dia nggak bisa di sisi. Suaranya udah belum, udah share belum coba. Oh, udah. Eh, bingung ini.
So this video completes the Trinity. We have Rome, Greece and Egypt all done now. In the description you will find links to ancient Egypt and ancient Greece if you haven't already seen them. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe.
Kehidupan yang ini ya, yang apa? Maksudnya peradaban yang sangat eh, maju gitu ya, dan itu mewarisi kemajuan-kemajuan teknologi yang sekarang kita serap juga di dalam. Ini kenapa sih? Nah, terus dibandingkan ini tadi kan dia cerita gitu ya, bahwa si perusahaan ini tuh sudah menyelesaikan tiga tiga dokumenter gitu ya, sinematik animasi yang bisa memberi kita kayak kepean. Kepean itu gambaran ringkasan tentang Romawi yang tadi udah tonton, dan sekarang eh, Yunani. Ya, Greek Yunani ya. Sih, oke. Jadi sekarang kalian di benak kalian sudah kebayangan tadi itu Roma, terus kemudian Yunani itu kayak apa?
So that was Greece. I actually just did the ancient Egypt version of this, and coming up we have ancient Rome. So I'll leave those videos in the description so you can enjoy those. On this channel, we focus on ancient
Jadi sekarang udah kebayang ya bahwa ada ruang-ruang yang berbentuk lorong, kemudian berbentuk yang ada di Yunani ya, berbentuk lorong, yang simetris dan sebagainya. Kemudian seperti apa tadi kehidupan di Romawi sudah kita saksikan. Nah, sekarang ini perkenalan. Masih pakai bahasa Inggris ya. Arsitektur Romawi itu merenovasi atau mengolah kembali dari eh, arsitektur yang sebelumnya gitu ya, yang dari batu dan sebagainya. Kemudian dia lebih me- kalau bahasa kita tuh mengupgrade ya. Jadi eh, ya ya make sense ya, masuk akal begitu ya, bahwa peradaban Romawi itu menyempurnakan peradaban Yunani. Begitu kemudian begitu dalam bentuk struktur dan keindahan. The were master building roads, dan kemudian mereka mulai kemampuan konstruksi yang tadinya kita tahu sudah dimiliki itu sekarang meningkat, bukan hanya untuk building atau bangunan tapi untuk ruang luar, sehingga mereka sudah mempunyai ahli jalan, jembatan gitu ya, kemudian bendungan dan sebagainya. Gila ya, mereka sudah punya itu semua. Dan kemudian dia menciptakan perumahan-perumahan. Jadi rumah itu bukan rumah raja tok seperti waktu Yunani, tapi sudah perumahan, kemudian sculpture-sculpture dan sebagainya. Kemudian ada ruang-ruang publik ya tadi ya, Kolosium, Pantheon segala macam itu. Nah, mari kita saksikan. Kalau di sini tuh kecil cobalnya.
The city of Rome is located at the side of the Tiber River, 20,000 steps away from the sea.
Nah, ini terlalu kecil. Enakan di YouTube langsung. Karena kalau ini disambung di YouTube dia suka putus. Ya.
The river easily.
Ini kalau langsung disambung di YouTube, nah dia nggak mau. Jadi kita hack. Nah, dia udah bahasa Indonesia, oke.
City of Rome is located at the side of the Tiber River, 20,000 steps away from the sea. The river easily crosses this place and its nearby hills can easily be walled. The ancient Roman wall used to embrace 7 hills. Rome was founded in the year 753 before Christ. On the Capitoline Hill, the most sacred of them all, there are many sacred buildings, of which the most famous is the Temple of Jupiter. The north-facing part of the hill that is firmly walled is called the Arx. On top of the Arx, the Temple of Juno Moneta is situated, where coins are made out of precious metals. At the foot of the hill there's the Tabularium, which is a huge building where mail and public letters are kept. Under the Capitoline and Palatine hills is the Roman Forum. In that valley there was once a big lake that was dried up after the water was diverted to the river through an underground sewer called Cloaca Maxima. Large number of people came every day to the Roman Forum. It was the most busy and crowded place in the city, surrounded by many public and sacred buildings. This is the Basilica Aemilia, which together with the Basilica Julia is the largest public building in the Forum. The basilicas used to occupy a better place in the fora of the Roman cities. In ancient times, a basilica was a public building where many businesses and courts of law were conducted. Later, Christians took advantage of the basilical form to use it as a religious site for the celebration of liturgy. Centuries later, when the empire became officially Christian, the term was also used to refer to large or important churches. In this sense, the denomination is used today both from an architectural and a religious point of view. Next to the Basilica Aemilia, in the part of the Forum called Comitium, the Curia is located. The Curia is the building where the Roman Senate meets. The Senate consists of 600 senators, very noble citizens who before Caesar's time had the highest power in the Roman Republic. Before the Comitium, there is a high place where orators spoke to people. The name of this place is Rostra, because seawalls of captured ships were adorned in the front. Rostra in Latin is the plural of rostrum, that is the iron part that protrudes from the bow of the ships, and that was used to attack enemy ships. Many illustrious orators such as Cicero ascended to the rostra to give a speech to the people. Of the Roman temples, the smallest was certainly the Temple of Janus. He was also the oldest one. This temple has two doors that are always open, and are only closed when throughout the whole empire the land and the sea are at peace. These doors were only closed twice from the age of Romulus until the Augustus regime. Augustus closed it for the third time in 700 years after he defeated Marcus Antonius in the Battle of Actium. In the other side of the Forum is the Temple of Vesta, which had a round shape. Vesta is the goddess of fire and of home, in whose temple an eternal fire burns. 6 Vestal virgins, daughters of illustrious Romans, were chosen to make sure that the fire was never extinguished, for the fire always burning meant Rome, eternal city. Next to the Temple of Vesta is the Regia, house of the Maximum Pontiff, house where the Roman kings once lived. The Maximum Pontiff is the prefect of all other Roman priests. The job of the Roman priests was to sacrifice animals to the gods and take care of the divine things. In front of the Regia is a temple dedicated to Gaius Julius Caesar, which is called the Temple of the Divine Julius. Caesar, like some Roman emperors, was turned into a god after his death, and he was called divine. The Temple of the Divine Julius was built by his nephew Augustus, in the same place where his body was cremated by the mourning citizens. On either side of the Basilica Julia, there is a large temple. To the right, under the Capitoline, the Temple of Saturn, and to the left, the Temple of Castor and Pollux. The Temple of Saturn is a treasury, the place where public money is preserved. This ancient temple was destroyed in a fire and rebuilt. The Temple of Castor and Pollux is dedicated to the gods Castor and Pollux, twin sons of Jupiter whom the Romans asked for help in battles. Between this temple and the Temple of the Divine Julius, the Senate and the people of Rome built a marble arch to the victorious Augustus after the Battle of Actium. In front of the tabularium are the temples of Concord and of the divine Vespasian. The Temple of Concord was built after a long discord between two enemy factions into which the Roman people had been divided, the patricians and the plebeians. The temple was built when Concord between all the citizens was finally restored. Near this temple is the jail, whose dark, stinking underground part is called Tullianus. The Arch of Septimius Severus, at the northwest of the Forum, was built to commemorate the victories of Emperor Septimius Severus and his two sons, Caracalla and Geta, in the 2 campaigns against the Parthians. The Miliarum Marium was a monument erected by the Emperor Caesar Augustus near the Temple of Saturn. All roads throughout the empire were considered to begin at this monument, and all distances in the empire were measured relative to it. The Temple of the Divine Vespasian was constructed by his sons, Titus and Domitian, after the death of their father. Right next to this temple are the porticos of the 12 gods and goddesses, where a golden statue of each god is found inside each portico.
Now you might be wondering, how can we possibly know that a place like this used to look like that? If there's only foundations left and maybe a few columns, these remains help us identify the scale and the size of the buildings. Additionally, there's a handful of buildings that have stood the test of time, as well as images of the buildings printed in ancient coins. But the most important thing are the books written by Vitruvius. In Rome, there's a lot of public buildings. Today we explore the ones that surround the most important part of the city. If you wish to watch the second part of this video where we explore different typologies of buildings, such as these, then like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you and goodbye.
Nih. Nah, ini adalah eh, arsitektur Roma yang dominan ya, itu Roman Forum. Roman Forum itu adalah pusat dari politik dan sosial aktivitas di arsitektur klasik Roma. Dia public space begitu. Nah, di situ mulai ada tempel. Ya, ini peralihan ini masih hampir mirip-mirip lah dengan Yunani, bahwa di dalam Roman Forum itu, di dalam karakter arsitektur Roma itu ada tempel, ada basilika, bangunan publik begitu, yang digunakan untuk bisnis gitu kan. Kemudian dia ada renovasi beberapa abad. Kemudian Arch of Septimius Severus ini pemerintahan Emperor Victory di Parthia, di dalam hasil dari peperangan Romawi itu, dia berlokasi di dalam Roman Forum. Jadi yang di bagian Roman Forum ini kita masih melihat ciri-ciri yang sama dengan Yunani pada Roman Forum. Nah, kemudian ini adalah salah satunya, Colosseum. Nah, simbol dari arsitektur Roma. Saya pernah ke sana ini. Nah, kemudian tapi kalian bisa bayangin ya, betapa lengkung dan kubahnya itu sudah detail begitu. Terus kemudian teater itu sudah fungsi yang melibatkan ruang publik begitu. Kemudian, nah, satu loncatan yang menggambarkan kemajuan arsitektur di masa Roma ini adalah mereka sudah menciptakan ruang-ruang publik indoor yang cukup besar, kemudian outdoor yang fungsional. Jadi nanti di sini nih kalian mulai melihat ada tadi ini Colosseum, kemudian ada ruang-ruang luar, misalnya kayak apa tadi ya, nanti tempat gimnasium dan sebagainya, publik, nanti mulai ada pasar dan sebagainya begitu ya. Ini yang nanti yang mengambil Colosseum boleh didata lebih detail sejarahnya, desainnya, kemudian proses restorasinya. Tapi kita cari gambarannya. Ngomongin jangan kita cari, kita berkunjung ke sana. Cie. Ini Colosseum ya, agak panjang. Jadi bayangkan sekian ribu tahun yang lalu.
Colosseum. Oh, you should see the Colosseum, Spaniard. Thousand Romans. Watching every movement of your sword, willing you to make that killer blow. Silence before you strike. Noise afterwards.
Jadi hening sebelum tusuk, menang, bergetar. Ini kehidupan Colosseum.
As if you were the Thunder God himself.
The Colosseum is one of the most famous buildings in the world. It is one of the greatest tourist attractions in Rome. It is a building that has captured the attention of painters over the years. And yet in terms of landmarks, never has there been a landmark that is so associated with blood and squalor as the Colosseum.
It was huge. It had room for more than 50,000 spectators. It had 76 numbered entrance doors, and it was used for more than 700 years. This building was started by the Emperor Vespasian, the first emperor of the Flavian dynasty. Then he died, and his son Titus finished the building in the year 80. Here is Nero's site plan. Something very important about this building is where it was located, which shows us how incredibly shrewd Emperor Vespasian was in earning the acceptance of the people. He decided to destroy Nero's Domus Aurea, despite the fact that it was an architectural wonder, full of ornamentation with revolving ceilings, made by these great architects and artists, which would have been a great place for him and for his dynasty to live in. But he decided to raze it to the ground for political reasons to discredit Nero and hope to gain favor with the people. What he did wisely was to give this property back to the Roman people and do something that they would like to have in their city. So he decides to dry up the artificial lake that Nero had built, and right in the middle of that area, he builds the Colosseum, and the message is clear. What did the Roman people want more than anything else? They wanted a huge amphitheater where 50,000 of them could enter and spectate gladiatorial combats with wild animals. There's no better way to gain favor with the citizens than to build something like this. And even better to build it on top of the pleasurable artificial lake of Nero built just for himself. By the way, they were called gladiators because the Latin word for sword is gladius. Therefore, gladiator, one who carries a sword. The original name of the Colosseum was actually the Flavian Amphitheater, named after the family of emperors, Flavius. But in the Middle Ages, it became to be known colloquially as the Colosseum, not because of its colossal scale, but because of the Colossus, the enormous statue of Nero that stood nearby, made by the Greek architect Zenodorus, with a height of more than 30 meters. And the other thing that Vespasian did was erase the features of Nero from the statue to turn it into a statue of Sol, the sun god. His face was fixed to resemble Sol and not Nero. Seeing how Greek types are transformed into Roman architecture, it is a theme that constantly returns to this notion of different technologies, different ideas of urban space, different ideas of interior design. And to understand the shape of the Colosseum, it is necessary to see what the Greek theaters were like. Here we're looking at the Greek theater of Epidaurus, and like many Greek sites, it's all about revealing a landscape, a panorama, sacred mountains in the distance, and a truly clear geometry, which makes you understand that you're in a specific place. There would have been a stage and a wall behind called proscenium, which was low enough so that if you were sitting in the steps, you could see the stage, but you could also see the landscape behind. This is the Theater of Merida in Spain. Typologically, it preserves many of the things that we saw in the Greek examples, such as the circle with the steps. But the proscenium completely closes the space. Also, instead of being an object introduced into a landscape, where the natural slope of a mountain begins to give geometry to the place, it is an architectural construction. Another one of these megastructures that the Romans have no problems building with their concrete arches, and since it is a freestanding structure, it can be placed right in the middle of the city. The Colosseum uses the same scheme as the Marcellus Theater in Rome. Typologically, a Greek theater is open, giving you a view of the stage and the landscape. The Romans are always transforming and playing with typologies, always creating hybrids. This results in the amphitheater type of arena. Essentially, they are two theaters that were put together, but with a very different presence than the Greek theater, gently placed in the landscape. It becomes a giant object in the city of Rome, slammed into other elements that organize themselves. The ancient Roman Forum and the rest of the city are arranged around it. This view gives us an idea of how the building is shaped. It was essentially built with barrel vaults running on ramps and a series of annular vaults that provided lateral circulation and that are buttressed by the thrust of the seating. This is the hallway in the first floor of the Colosseum, which, of course, is made of concrete. These annular vaults rest on large travertine piers. That is the first floor. On the second floor, however, we see something completely innovative, and it is the introduction of a new vault form never seen before. This is called the groin vault, and you get it when you take two barrel vaults and make them intersect. The angles that you get create this type of vault. They become very popular. Once they begin to be used in the Colosseum, we will see the proliferation of groin vaults from this moment on. Unfortunately, it seems to be quite stripped bare, But it is important to know that it was also highly decorated, like so many other Roman buildings. The entire surface was covered with stucco, and later with figurative decoration and painting. Both the vaults themselves and the corridors all very elaborately decorated in ancient Roman times. Something very apparent about the interior of the Colosseum is that it was built of concrete faced with red brick. An important part of Nero's architectural revolution was the fact that they began to build the concrete buildings lined with brick. That had to do with brick being more fireproof than stone, and they began to use it. It's an important facet of Nero's architectural revolution that was not lost with his death. The exterior of the building is quite well preserved. The Colosseum had 4 levels. The structure itself is made of concrete. The facing is travertine, an Italian stone from the Tivoli region. We see these large arcades and these columns that are placed between the arches. This is the building that tells us exactly what the Greek orders meant to the Romans. The Greek orders are a system of measurements and ornaments that has the columns and their architraves. There are 3 Greek orders: the Doric, which is the simplest, the Ionic, which is the one with the volutes on the capital, and the Corinthian, which is the one with acanthus leaves. The Greeks used the orders according to the type of building. When you build a building based on the arch, you have no structural need for columns. The arches are supported by thick piers. And you can see it here, where the columns of the Colosseum are only in the facade. On the right side, only the arches with their piers remain, and you can see that the act of removing the columns from the front does not make the building collapse. It holds up perfectly. If you remove the columns from the Parthenon or any Greek temple, it will collapse. If you remove the columns from many Roman buildings, they will not collapse. So, why do the Romans continue to use Greek columns if they are constructing buildings whose structural system does not require columns? This is a great contribution that the Romans made to Western architecture, transforming the Greek orders into something purely ornamental. In the worldview of much of the modern architecture, that is a terrible thing to say, transforming a structural element into something merely ornamental. But the Romans did not think they were doing something merely ornamental. Rather, they were not only paying homage to the Greeks, but also recognizing that the Greeks had created a language based on these columns. And this language is something that existed apart from the structure of the building. That was spoke was not the structure of the building, but the forms in which the structure was created. In this case, it was the orders. So the Romans took these columns and their entablatures, the entire order, and put it in front of the building. They take the idea that Vitruvius gives us that there is a certain hierarchy in the orders. The Doric symbolizes strength and heroism. It was associated with the masculine form. The Ionic is more slender, and it was associated with the form of a mature woman. And the Corinthian, it was the most delicate order, representing a maiden. And in the case of the Colosseum, the Romans arranged these columns in this order: Doric, Ionic, Corinthian. Actually, the ones at the bottom are Tuscan columns, a variation of the Doric that the Romans inherited from the Etruscans. The job of the orders in the Colosseum is to mention the relationships of the proportions, or in the words of Vitruvius, it's all about ratio venustatis, the sense of beauty. You just have to pay attention to the stacking of the orders, because the Colosseum becomes an important precedent for architects as they move to new types of buildings. And so, wherever we see any building with arches and piers, and then the column that is superimposed in front of the pier, we call it the motif of the Colosseum, which was very used in the Renaissance. The Colosseum was not the first building to do this, but it is the most famous and the most obvious to do so. And there is one more thing. In the attic of the Colosseum, we have what we call a pilaster, which is a flat representation in relief of a classical column attached to a wall. It is a substitute for a column. It has a base, a shaft, and a capital, and it carries an entire entablature, just like a column would. The Greeks did not use pilasters, but something called antae. Normally in Greece there were piers in front of a temple that were actually structural. In this particular temple called Thrasyllus, the pillars are given column capitals, and that can be considered as the birth of the pilaster, which was used by the Romans every now and then, but in the Italian Renaissance it was employed all the time. At the top of the Colosseum you can see the detail of the pilasters, and among them travertine blocks that protrude from the wall. They were used to support the wooden poles that supported the awning that was used to protect the spectators from the sun and rain. This awning was called velarium. The interior, on the other hand, is not as well preserved as the exterior. However, its ruins tell us a lot. Looking down, we can see the elliptical shape of the arena. Here we can see the substructures all made of concrete. The ones that are below the arena itself were used for the storage of props, but also for the housing of animals that were brought up for animal combat. They had a system of ramps and pulleys, and they took the animals either up the ramps or by pulley from these cages. This is how the amphitheater seats were divided. The entire part where the seats rest is called cavea, and each of these sections designated for the different entrances to the Colosseum is called coneius. They were divided into different sections where different social classes sat. At the bottom, almost at the level of the arena, the senators and the upper class. In the middle, the ordinary citizens, and at the top were women and slaves. Even more striking is the fact that, although the concrete substructures for the seats on which the cavea rested can be seen, only a single coneius remains with a small number of marble seats. All the seats were sheathed in marble in ancient times. The reason why only one coneius is preserved is because the Colosseum was used as a marble quarry during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance by the popes. The popes did not hesitate to plunder the Colosseum for the marble they needed for the buildings they were erecting around Rome. The marble of the Colosseum ended up in some extraordinary buildings, so it was not in vain, but at the same time, it obviously changed the face of the interior of the Colosseum forever. This is a restored view on how the interior of the Colosseum would have looked in ancient times when a gladiatorial performance was taking place. They covered the arena with artificial grass, they planted trees and made props that took the shapes of mountains, and then the gladiators and the animals. You can also see the seats, the cavea, the wedge-shaped sections of those seats. The conei, 50,000 people packed for this special event. And then at the top you see the velarium. These are coins that show the Colosseum in the 3rd century. We see the building with an event inside and with those poles that supported the velarium. We also see the Colossus, the statue of Nero that was clearly still standing. It is also thanks to these coins that we know that under each arch of the 2nd and 3rd levels there were statues. In the Colosseum, the substructures are very poorly preserved, but this is another amphitheater in southern Italy, in a place near Naples called Pozzuoli, where the substructures are well preserved. And you can get a better idea of what they would have looked like in ancient times. There are annular vaulted corridors down below. They are well preserved, as are the cages in which the animals were kept. And here you see the very well preserved arena pavement made of concrete with those openings in it. These are the openings through which the props and the animals were brought up. This is a page from Le Corbusier's book, Toward an Architecture. This is Le Corbusier talking about the Colosseum, talking about a triumphal arch, and talking about a pyramid, all on the same page. How can the Colosseum, a triumphal arch, and a pyramid be related? And Le Corbusier is certainly not talking about history. He's talking about something extra historical, something about the physical nature of these buildings. They are huge, they are very big, and when you put a strong Mediterranean light in them, you get a powerful plate of light and shade. They look like platonic solids. The pyramid is a simple geometric shape. This is an architect escaping from everything unnecessary and doing something powerful and elemental and platonic. And the same is true for the Colosseum. It is a cylinder. We have been admiring the articulation of the wall, but in another level it is this basic cylindrical mass bathed in light. When we take a look at the triumphal arch, at some fundamental level it is a rectilinear slab, casting a shadow and bathed in light. And in fact, Le Corbusier has this image as a cover in his treatise on cities. A drawing of Rome that doesn't seem to be interested in expressing perspective of how it is seen from a point of view. Instead, he's calling out all of these objects. A mausoleum, the pyramid of Gaius Cestius, the Colosseum, these elemental solids that give character to the city. We all know what happened inside the amphitheaters. It was the propaganda machine to subjugate and delight at the same time the people of Rome. So there would be entertainment. The concept of bread and circus was one way in which the Roman emperors maintained the support of the people. You make sure that they are fed and entertained. So there would be all kinds of activities in the Colosseum, like gladiator fights and wild animals. You could flood it and reenact naval battles. There would be a lot of astonishing entertainments.
In the year 81, it was the inauguration of the Colosseum that lasted 100 days, in which 9,000 animals were killed.
In the 400 years in which the Colosseum was the Roman entertainment center, 400,000 men and 1 million beasts were killed. The Colosseum remained almost intact until the 6th century, and it suffered the greatest damages from earthquakes in 847 and 1231.
Oke. Belum ya?
I hope you enjoyed the video and learned from it. I would very much appreciate if you give me a like and subscribe to my channel. And if you feel like helping me a little more, I just started a new Patreon page, so any contribution will go to the making of better videos. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. All the links are in the description.
Oke. Colosseum, kemudian Pantheon. Jadi ini adalah tempel begitu ya, tapi kalian bisa melihat bahwa tempelnya sudah penuh dengan ornamen yang lebih apa ya, lebih genit, lebih detail dibanding yang ada di Yunani gitu ya. Dibangun itu dia sudah terakhir ya, jadi 20 tahun sebelum Masehi, kemudian dibangun lagi 118 112 setelah Masehi, kemudian yang menarik adalah dia punya dom yang sangat besar gitu ya di Pantheon, kemudian domnya itu dilengkapi lubang di atas sebagai pencahayaan. Nah, signifikansinya ini adalah bahwa dia mendapatkan apa ya? Dia mendapatkan prioritas di dalam preservasi, di dalam perlindungan peninggalan Roma gitu ya, sehingga kita masih bisa mempelajari banyak hal yang sudah mampu dilakukan oleh bangsa Roma gitu ya. Kemudian kita kemudian terus dia sekarang menjadi gereja Katolik gitu ya. Terus kemudian next. Nah, ada lagi nih Bats, ini tempat mandi Bats Caracalla ini. Jadi satu demi satu kita kupas yang tadi yang ini Kolosium itu adalah sebuah ruang terbuka yang itu konsep baru gitu ya, bahwa pemerintahan dulu waktu zaman Yunani kita mengetahui bahwa peninggalan dari sebuah pemerintahan yang kokoh itu di masa Yunani ya adalah tempat tinggal rajanya atau istananya. Tapi sekarang pada saat Roma, Kolosium itu adalah bagian dari upaya sang raja untuk meningkatkan kekuatan koalisi. Jadi dia punya ruang besar untuk menyaring rakyat jelata yang jagoan-jagoan untuk diangkat gitu ya, derajatnya menjadi bagian dari kerajaan. Kemudian raja-raja dan pangeran dan apa ya ikut menonton gitu. Itu adalah bagian untuk memperkuat koalisinya gitu ya. Kalian pasti bisa mudeng ke koalisi-koalisi karena kita lagi ngalami cerita-cerita itu. Kemudian Pantheon. Nah, Pantheon ini masih tempat ibadah sih dari agama. Kemudian, nah ini ada lagi nih tempat mandi gitu ya, dibangun di kekuasaan Emperor Roman eh, pada awal abad ketiga gitu. Dia dia menjadi eh, tempat mandi terbuka yang terbesar, dan kemudian dia bisa menampung 1.600 orang untuk mandi bersama. Digunakan itu ya, fungsinya itu digunakan selama 300 tahun. Eh, Kemudian ada bencana alam, kemudian rusak gitu ya. Nah, ini banyak kita temukan juga ternyata waktu kemarin saya keliling Jogja, itu di kota gedenya. Kemudian Solo juga ada, di pelosok Solo itu ada peninggalan tentang tempat pemandian umum. Jadi waktu itu kan membuat tem, ada wabah gitu ya, sehingga eh, upaya mandi dan buang air besar itu menjadi suatu pemecahan masalah dari terjadinya wabah. Kalian ketahui sendiri wabahnya kan tercipta dari utilitas yang buruk ya. Terus kemudian kota-kota itu mulai menciptakan tempat mandi yang di dalamnya ada saluran pembuangan air kotor, saluran tempat buang air besar yang masuk ke dalam bawah dan kemudian diolah begitu sehingga tidak tidak sehingga dapat dikontrol gitu ya, tidak terjadi penyebaran wabah. Nah, mulai mulai kesadaran untuk menciptakan tempat mandi bagi orang banyak itu kalau di Roma mulai dari abad ketiga. Tapi Solo yang didirikan 1745 kemarin masih ada tempat-tempat. Oh, kalian kalau tahu Taman Sari Jogja itu kan tempat mandi putri-putri raja ya. Nah, nah tadi setelah tempat mandi ada sirkus, Circus of Maximus. Ini tadi saya cerita tadi kan mereka punya ruang publik indoor ya tadi Colosseum, kemudian ruang publik outdoor itu Circus Maximus, stadium gitu ya. Kemudian dia bisa menampung 150.000 orang kapasitasnya untuk melakukan kegiatan-kegiatan olahraga outdoor. Nah, kemudian ini yang tadi diucapkan tadi gerbang kemenangan The Arch of Constantine gitu ya dibangun 350 setelah. Jadi eh ini lagi azan. Jadi bangsa Roma itu punya kebiasaan kalau memenangkan sebuah wilayah dibikin gerbang kalau dia menang. Kenapa? Karena dititeni bahwa itu sudah menjadi milik dia begitu. Nah, Paris itu ada Arc de Triomphe gitu kan. Nah, itu itu adalah peninggalan dari penanda-penanda atas kemenangan Roma. Roma tuh nek menang loh ditandai kayak binatang itu. Binatang itu kalau itu tempat dia kan terus dikencingi ya kalau binatang. Nah, kalau ini Roma tuh langsung dibikin gerbang bahwa saya sudah menguasai wilayah ini. Begitu, ini Arts of the Constant. Ini salah satunya, tapi di banyak tempat begitu. Nah, ini Trajan itu pasar. Nah, sekarang kalian udah mulai merasakan ya bahwa eh, Roma tuh udah lengkap ya fasilitas arsitekturnya gitu ya. Kenapa? Masyarakatnya sudah maju. Kalian mengingat kemarin demokrasi dan sebagainya itu kan di zaman Yunani sudah berjalan ya pembagian kekuasaan. Nah, di zaman Roma itu dasar-dasar demokrasi sudah ada. Kemudian mereka melanjutkan ke apa ya pengembangan bisnis dan sebagainya. Tadi sudah ada pasar, kemudian sudah ada apa namanya tadi seni dan sebagainya. Trajan Market adalah komplek di Roma didesain untuk pasar yang beberapa lantai loh, 3 lantai kalau nggak salah. Bisa menampung 50 toko dan perkantoran. Keren ya, dia udah punya ruko. Market dia kayak supermarket gitu loh. Kombinasinya didesain menggunakan kombinasi beton dan bata gitu. Terus dia dia di beberapa pasar yang ditemukan itu ada apartemen, ada apa ya, ada tempat tinggal keluarga dari pemilik bangunannya. Jadi itu yang dilakukan di zaman modern itu di Singapura. Jadi Singapura itu apartemen apartemen menengah ke bawah ya. Jadi kayak rumah susun itu diletakkan di atas pasar. Sehingga pasarnya itu juga aman karena di atasnya adalah pemilik rumahnya. Terus kemudian eh, jualannya di pasar itu pajak dan sebagainya, listrik dan malam itu ditanggung oleh orang yang tinggal di apartemen di atasnya begitu. Nah, itu yang dilakukan itu. Tapi ternyata bangsa Roma sudah melakukan itu jauh-jauh hari gitu ya. Di abad kedua sebelum Masehi itu sudah melakukan itu. Jadi signifikansinya apa toh? Jadi arsitektur yang ada di zaman ini gitu ya. Dia sudah menciptakan peran perdagangan atau pasar dalam jumlah besar, kemudian dipusatkan begitu ya, kemudian dia mudah menciptakan apa ya inovasi-inovasi di dalam kompleksnya. Nah ini, oh udah, ini buat materi kalau yang anak BC besok. Kalau ya anak A besok Selasa. Begitu, ini masih sisa 17 menit. Saya persilahkan untuk bertanya kalau ada yang mau dipertanyakan. Kalau tidak ada, ya kuliahnya saya akhiri. Ada yang mau bertanya? Halo? Kalau tidak ada pertanyaan, kuliahnya saya akhiri ya. Kalian dapat bonus nih sekitar 18 menit buat beristirahat karena saya tur 3 jam aku mulang tanpa henti. Jadi saya tunggu kalau ada pertanyaan. Kalau nggak ada pertanyaan, kuliahnya saya akhiri. Tidak? Halo? Kalau nggak kuliahnya saya nggak ada pertanyaan ya. Kalau nggak kuliahnya saya akhiri ya.